Our story begins when an American family moves to Johannesburg, South Africa in 1975. When they moved into their new home in a rich white neighborhood, they were treated very nicely, since it was very rare for a white American family to live in South Africa. Things were normal at first, but 2 days later, the white American family discovered to their horror that the black people were treated much worse than in the USA. What they saw and witnessed was police brutality at its worst. Blacks who had approved work by whites were issued and had to have passbooks if they wanted to go anywhere in the segregated city. If not having a valid pass or any pass at all, was subject to immediate arrest and summary trial. Blacks could not run businesses or professional practices. Blacks were allowed to live and only allowed to live in townships, places that were outside white cities or suburbs like Soweto. These places were run down and unfit to live in. Homes the Africans had were tin sheds with no plumbing or electricity. And most of all, the Africans were very poor. After seeing and hearing this, they found out that none of their neighbors or friends didn't care and were very racist and referred to Africans as Kafirs, a put-down word for Africans. But Henry, the oldest son in the family, who was 23, thought that what was happening in South Africa was wrong and wanted to make a stand. One day, while Henry was visiting the township, Henry met a 24-year-old African called Philip, whose brother was killed viciously by the police and had suffered a great deal under the apartheid. They talked for a while and decided to join forces to stop the madness in South Africa. They formed an organization called the Anti-Apartheid Nonviolent Movement. They held meetings and rallies against the apartheid, but one day, however, while Henry and Philip and the others who belonged to the AANM were caught by the police and arrested. While in jail, Henry, Philip, and the others were interrogated, beaten badly, and tortured and almost killed. Later that night, at the jail, Henry and Philip somehow managed to escape. Since they were wanted men, they fled the country to Botswana in the city of Gaborone. There, they would continue their anti-apartheid movement. Meanwhile, in Johannesburg, the police searched the American family's house for evidence against them. They harassed them as well. The same for Philip's family, but even worse. One day, while Henry's family was watching TV in the living room, the police came and shot out their windows. One of the bullets hit and killed Henry's 10-year-old brother, Mark. When news got to Henry of his brother's death, he was enraged and sad. The same went for Philip, since 2 of his family members were killed by the police as well. From this point on, Henry and Philip became anti-Afrikaner, and nonviolence was not the way to deal with these types of things. So for 3 years, Henry and Philip smuggled machine guns, automatic guns, bazookas, and rocket launchers. In November of 1977, Henry and Philip and other men that were on their side went back to South Africa. Henry went to Pretoria with a group of men, and Philip went to Johannesburg with a group of men. They went straight to the townships. Once there, Henry, Philip, and the men saw police and soldiers at the townships. Henry and Philip and the men went down to the townships and killed all the police and soldiers. After all the soldiers and police were dead, Henry and Philip told the African citizens that the time is now to revolt against those Afrikaner pieces of shit. We have been raped, beaten, tortured, mutilated, and castrated long enough. Who's with me? After that, all the African citizens agreed to rebel against the Afrikaners. They took the weapons that Henry and Philip had smuggled and went into Johannesburg, Pretoria, and the massacre began. After the riot, the Africans had won the battle but not the war. Henry was killed during the riot. Luckily, Mrs. Smith, Henry's mother, was hidden and safe from the riot. After she heard about Henry's death, she went into a period of grief and mourning. Because Henry was all she had left after Mark's death, now she had no one since her husband died in America. Meanwhile, in Johannesburg, the other Africans had gathered around Philip to hear him talk. This is what he said. "My brothers and sisters, today we have done the unthinkable. We have risen in rebellion against those who have kept us in misery and death for the past 200 years. In my opinion, it had to be done, in order for people to take us seriously and for things to change. We have tried to protest peacefully in the past, but that did not work. Instead, our efforts were crushed with violence. Steve Biko was murdered earlier this year, even though he was a non-violent person and meant well, and Nelson Mandela was in prison for life. They would have not chosen this path, but we have. We cannot change what we have done. The damage has been done. Hopefully in the future, this accursed apartheid will end and we will be able to be at peace with everyone in our country. We all know that all of the white soldiers will be coming to get us, but we will stand our ground. Hopefully that will not happen." Amandla!